Good evening, everyone. We're truly glad to have you back with us tonight. Most people use Airbnb for vacations, family trips, or a simple weekend getaway. But behind some front doors, hide stories you'll never find in the listing. Tonight, we'll explore 4 chilling true accounts from guests who booked what seemed like the perfect stay, only to discover unsettling secrets. Now turn down the lights. You are watching Sleep Horror Stories. I want to share my story anonymously because it's a sensitive matter and I'm not looking for any kind of fame by telling it. On the contrary, even when this happened, I refused to give interviews or reveal my name. My family's safety and privacy have always been more important to me. Still, I feel it's worth telling so people can stay alert and keep their guard up. This happened years ago, back when the Airbnb platform wasn't as popular. I was younger and I often had to travel outside the city, sometimes even out of the country, to give training sessions and consulting for the company I worked at. My wife usually came along, but at the time she was pregnant with our first child and decided to stay at her mother's place so she could be looked after. My mother-in-law is allergic to dogs, so I took our Labrador, Rocky, with me on the trip. I always rented through Airbnb. The company covered all expenses, and I'd never had any issues until that trip. My mistake was booking a place hosted by someone with 0 reviews. I figured it wouldn't matter. I'd done it before and everything had always gone fine. Besides, it was the only pet-friendly place near my work site. When I arrived that afternoon, it was a cozy 1-story apartment with a backyard, perfect for Rocky to run around. The host had left me a message with instructions on where to find the keys. I never saw him in person. He wasn't there when I arrived and never came by during my stay. He was short and to the point in his messages. Not rude, just transactional. That first night, I let Rocky into the backyard before bed. Since we'd arrived, he'd been glued to the back door, scratching and whining to get out. The moment I opened it, he bolted into the yard, barking and crying in a desperate, almost panicked way. I had no idea why. Not wanting to bother any neighbors, I brought him back inside. But he kept pacing at the back door, scratching and barking, so I had to put him in his travel crate to calm him down. He was restless all night, whining and scratching. Rocky was normally a well-trained, calm dog. This was completely out of character. The next night, while I was sleeping, I woke to the sound of someone crying in the backyard. It was so clear, so real, that I jumped up immediately. Rocky was barking toward the bedroom window that faced the yard. I peeked through the blinds. No one there. Still, I was certain of what I'd heard, and so was Rocky. On my last night in town, I was finally drifting off to sleep when someone pounded hard on the front door. I looked out the side window. 3 police officers were standing outside, their flashlights cutting through the dark. I opened the door, confused, and they asked what I was doing there. I explained I was just renting the place for 3 days and showed my booking on my phone. They apologized but told me they had a search warrant. The property owner was wanted for multiple murders. They needed a search before he fled. My stomach dropped. As I packed up, I mentioned to the officers that Rocky had been obsessed with the backyard the entire time. That's when they told me. They found at least 7 bodies buried in that yard, all skeletal remains. The owner was a wealthy, intelligent local man, a serial killer who'd been operating for years. His strategy was to rent out the home so there'd always be activity and no one would suspect what was buried out back. I left with Rocky that night, and I've never looked at Airbnb the same way again. A while back, I booked an Airbnb with my parents in a small town in North Carolina. We were headed there for my brother's wedding and decided to arrive several days early to help him and my soon-to-be sister-in-law with preparations. The house was modest but charming. 2 stories, decorated with bright colors and a rustic southern charm. We arrived at dawn, exhausted from the drive, and went straight to bed. That first night was uneventful, or at least I think it was, since we were all in such a deep sleep. The next morning, we headed out early to visit the reception hall, confirm the floral arrangements, and take care of other details. I'll admit, I was bored out of my mind. Wedding decor isn't exactly my thing. My mom told me to take the afternoon off, wander around town, and meet them later at the house. It was around 5 p.m. when I decided to head back. The summer heat was unbearable, so I figured I'd take a shower, order some food, and relax inside. By the time I was rinsing off, I heard noises downstairs, footsteps, faint creaks. I assumed my parents had come back early, which didn't make much sense since they'd planned dinner out. I called out for them several times, no answer. Wrapped in a towel, I cautiously went downstairs. No one was there. Everything was still. So I went back up, got dressed, and ordered food through a delivery app. I'd barely settled into bed with the TV on when I heard it again. This time, it wasn't footsteps. It was the sound of wheels, like an old stroller or a bicycle rolling across the hardwood floor. But it wasn't rhythmic like pedaling. It was slow, deliberate, accompanied by the faint squeak of old metal. I grabbed the pocket knife I always keep with me and went downstairs again. Nothing. The place was practically empty except for the basic furniture. No carts, no bikes. Confused, I went back up to wait for my food. Around 8 p.m., I spotted the delivery driver outside on his motorbike, ready to leave. I rushed to the door, but before I could say anything, he shouted back that he'd already given my order to the lady in the wheelchair. I froze. "What lady?" I asked. He described an elderly woman who'd opened the door, silently taken a bag, and wheeled herself back inside. I stepped out to look around. The porch, the backyard, nothing. When I entered the kitchen, the takeout bag was sitting neatly on the table. That's when the hairs on my neck stood on end. I ran upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and called my parents. They were still at the restaurant, but said they'd head back soon. In the meantime, the sound returned, that slow, squeaking roll of wheels across the floor. This time, I knew exactly what it was, a wheelchair. When my parents finally came in, I told them what had happened. They didn't seem convinced until that night. Around 2 a.m., my mother's scream echoed through the house. My dad and I rushed downstairs to find her pale and trembling in the kitchen. She said she'd gone for a glass of water and had seen an old woman in a wheelchair gliding across the back hallway. The door to the yard had been open, but there was no one outside. That was enough for my mom. We packed our things and left immediately. The next morning, the host insisted on coming over to talk. She was a woman in her mid-30s, friendly but visibly uneasy. She admitted that previous guests had left early too, all reporting the same sighting. The house had belonged to her grandmother, a bitter, strong-willed woman who died of a heart attack there years ago. They'd been estranged, but with no other heirs, the property fell into her hands. She decided to rent it out for extra income. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, I can tell you this. The spirit of that old woman is still in that house. And for one terrifying night, I was alone with her. A few years ago, my girlfriend and I planned a tropical getaway to celebrate my birthday. Living in a cold state like Minnesota, we were craving warm weather and ocean views. She found what seemed like the perfect Airbnb. Close to the beach, fully equipped, and surprisingly affordable. The host profile showed it was an older woman renting the place, which somehow made my girlfriend feel even more at ease. We arrived to find the apartment much bigger than expected, spacious, modestly decorated, but all we really cared about was a comfortable bed and a roof over our heads. The host had messaged us instructions, but couldn't meet us in person due to other commitments. That didn't bother us. The first night, we were exhausted and went straight to bed. Around 3 a.m., I woke to a faint noise. My girlfriend was still asleep, so I didn't mention it. I figured it was nothing. I went to the kitchen for a glass of water, and that's when I heard it again, this time upstairs. I bolted up to check our room and the one next to it, but found no one. The next day, I didn't bring it up. I didn't want to ruin our beach day. But while sitting on the sand, she turned to me and said, "I don't want to freak you out, but since we got here, I felt like we're being watched." That caught me off guard. She explained she'd felt a constant presence, almost as if someone was in a room with us. I offered to book a hotel for the rest of the trip, but she said no, maybe it was just her imagination, and besides, she didn't want to waste more money. That night, I stayed close to her in the apartment. Still, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started feeling it too. And just like the night before, the noises came back. This time, I listened more carefully. They were slow, deliberate footsteps. Because the place had wood floors Every step echoed. I checked again. No one. In the morning, while she showered, I suddenly heard something new. Crying. A man's voice, muffled but close, as if it came from the next room. I approached the wall behind our bed, and the sound grew louder. That wall, as far as I knew, faced the outside. I leaned in closer and noticed small holes drilled near the top. The wood was worn and splintered around them. Slowly, I stepped onto the bed to peek through one. On the other side, lit by a single lamp, was a filthy mattress. It wasn't an empty space. It was a hidden room. Someone had been living there. I didn't wait to see more. When my girlfriend came out of the bathroom, I motioned for her to stay quiet. I grabbed what we could and got us out immediately. Outside, I explained everything. She started crying, realizing that her feeling of being watched had been right all along. We called the police, who arrived quickly. It was a busy tourist area. They searched the apartment and found the hidden door to that room behind a wardrobe in another bedroom. Inside was a man in his mid-40s, filthy, half-naked, and reeking. We later learned he was the actual host. He'd used his mother's ID to create the profile. She lived in another city and had no idea what he was doing. He'd been renting out the apartment to spy on guests, and the police found illegal weapons and drugs inside. That trip left us shaken to our core. Since then, we only stay at hotels or Airbnbs with hundreds of verified reviews. Because once you've shared a roof with a stranger hiding in your walls, you never forget it. About 2 years ago, my wife and I had just gotten married and decided to take a short honeymoon trip. I'll only say it was in Florida, somewhere with a warm climate and palm trees, the perfect escape from our routine. My wife booked a beautiful, budget-friendly apartment through Airbnb. It had a private pool, a gorgeous view, and a friendly host who welcomed us warmly, answered our questions about the city, and made us feel at home. During the day, everything felt perfect. But the first night, things changed. My wife has always struggled with insomnia, so while I slept, she stayed up reading by the large window in our bedroom that overlooked the pool. Around 2 a.m., she heard a sound outside, faint splashes like someone moving in the water. She got up, looked out, and saw nothing. A few minutes later, she heard it again. This time, it was clearer, the sound of water being disturbed. Still, the pool was empty. That's when she woke me. I went downstairs quietly, unlocked the patio door, and stepped out. No one was there. I told her it was probably a stray cat, or just her imagination. But minutes after lying back down, a loud thump came from outside. This time, I saw it, ripples spreading across the pool, as if someone had just climbed out. The next day, we tried to brush it off. We spent all day sightseeing and came back at midnight, exhausted. My wife showered while I relaxed in bed. That's when I heard it again, the water moving. I got up instantly. Through the glass patio doors, I saw something that made my stomach turn. 2 small, wet handprints on the glass, sliding downward. I rushed upstairs and told my wife. She insisted on seeing them herself. Together, we went down and confirmed it. The handprints were still there, along with wet footprints on the patio, leading from the pool straight to the glass. Now we were both on edge. We called a host, who arrived quickly. She reviewed the security footage on her phone with us. The video showed the pool water moving, then suddenly, the handprints appearing on the glass. But there was no one in the frame. With tears in her eyes, she told us something she hadn't mentioned before. She used to live there with her husband and 5-year-old daughter. One afternoon, while she was cooking, her daughter was playing outside by the pool. She didn't see her fall in until it was too late. The little girl had drowned. The host apologized and offered to refund the rest of our stay if we wanted to leave. We didn't even hesitate. We packed up that night. We didn't take the refund. It felt wrong, given what she'd been through. But one thing was certain. Neither of us would have slept another night in that apartment, knowing that the little hands on the glass weren't from anyone living.